Hello, this is Larry Curley with the National Indian Council on Aging, and I would like to welcome you all to this once in a long time event, and want to be able to provide to you today information that will help you navigate the system in the following days and the following months. But as in any Indian event, any tribal event, we always start with a prayer, and a prayer that blesses the proceedings. And with that, I would like to offer a prayer, a short prayer, in my own native language, which is the Navajo Nation. And essentially, it will start off with a prayer to Mother Earth and Father Sky, praying for a good day and for everyone that we represent. So, Ahla ne kon de shema no stan yadik shije hela nan de idole di shi gon jone gon ke chana I an jone go e yakode na de ni khatole kode bin yedet enigi e yakode hi masandon hi chedan lini yat e o e na de khatole dat no kode ban sete ke so tsuzen e na delne bin yedet enigi yat e ho kode ni masandon ni ke chedan lini ni naladan lini ba da hast hishi a konde di kode bin yedet enigi tsuzen ilnehi a chehe da bedit nieder dan ich in der Straße ja da hos a eba a chetan nitsen a da kon ich nat ani dan lini yat ehon han satak so det benat yat etole on joniko e kon han satak so det ik ho chatleon joniko e konde benasta de katan da aki binache a da konde sakesen lini joniko e na de ni kaso a hodn klo na de ni kato det e bin ye konde joniko e na de kato det e bin ye konde so e na na sleto det a hot ale ye konde arts konde so det e na ni slado det to ba hensen hen de snido det hajonastli and that is the essence of the prayer. And I would like to just move on into and introduce Jennifer Gilson, who will be moderating and overseeing the flow of the events today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Larry. So like Larry said, I'm Jennifer Gilson, and I'm from Kaufman Associates, and will be providing the support for today. So there are a couple of things about the platform that we want to make sure that you know how to use. The first one is being the chat function. It is down here at the bottom, and it is the bubble. If you click the bubble, then you can put in anything in the chat. You can tell us where you're coming from for today. We also have the Q&A function, so there will be enough time in each of the presentations to take questions and provide responses. If we're not able to get to those today, then we will follow up with you directly after. And then also, if you need any closed captions, you can click on the CC and it will show you the closed captions. If you have any technical assistance, you can also put it into the Q&A box and we will be able to assist you. Please note that this is being recorded and that all phone lines and computer lines have been muted. I will now turn it over to Sue Chapman of NICOA.
Thank you very much. Well, I get the distinct pleasure to give away door prizes today, and we've got $20 Walmart gift certificates that we are giving away, and you have to be present to win. And our first two winners are, and I hope I don't butcher these names, my apologies if I do, is Jerry Valo. And I see that you are present on the call. So you won one $20 Walmart gift certificate, and Michaela Cyber is the other winner this time around. So congratulations on the $20 gift certificate. And with that, I will turn it over to Becky Morgan, who is a NICOA project coordinator, to give you the history of the American Indian Alaskan Native voting. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us in our little learning community that we're creating today. We're really happy to be here. I originally asked Dr. Daniel Littlefield to handle this part of the presentation, but he wasn't able to join. If you are able to, please check out the website for the archive that he runs. It's the Sequoia National Research Center in Little Rock, Arkansas. It's a fascinating place. Some of the highlights are that they have a lot of tribal newspapers there, a huge collection. They also have something called the Modern Warriors of World War I. It's a database to identify all of the 12,000 American Indian servicemen that served during World War I. So very interesting. There's a lot to cover today, and it's a bit like Guido Sarducci's 5-Minute University, so we'll be going through a lot, but I think it'll be fun. Next slide, please. We want to thank AARP and Kaufman and Associates. Without their support and help, we couldn't do this presentation. We're so honored and thrilled to be able to do this, and thank you so much for your support. Next slide. National Indian Council on Aging is a 40-year-old organization, over 40 years actually. Our mission is to provide comprehensive health, social services, and economic well-being for American Indian and Alaska Native elders. We're a membership-based group. We have a job training program called CSEP, which is the Senior Community Service Employment Program. We have a project we're looking at long-term services and supports. We have the American Indian Technical Assistance and Resource Center. We're working on a diverse elders caregiving project, and most of all, we have our conference, which we have postponed this year, but it will be happening again in August of 2021. Next slide. So I watched a video recently called Warrior Women, and it's about Madonna Thunderhawk and her daughter, and it looks at the history of Madonna's life, and in the 70s, she started a survival school. I think that that's kind of an interesting idea, that maybe something that we're doing today is similar, in that we, in order to survive, we need to remember our history, we need to look to the past, and we need to plan for the future. So thank you. Next slide. So as I was looking at voting rights, I kept digging and digging, and human rights was something that kind of was at the very basis of this. As you can see, on the left there, there's the Declaration of Independence, and the idea of human rights is a topic still being debated, but it's about fundamental rights. It seems to be that most people agree that they apply to everyone just because they're human, and it tends to include social, political, economic, social, and cultural rights. As I say, still being debated, but as you remember, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness were in the Declaration of Independence and were meant to apply to all American citizens. Next slide, please. So civil rights are rights within those human rights that protect an individual's freedom, and one of those is that it entitles us to participate in the civil and political life of our society without discrimination or repression, and it tends to focus on the things that have been denied to people, like good education or good housing or public accommodation, but it also includes the right to get together, to assemble, to petition, and the right to vote. Okay, next slide. Voting rights is a key part of any democracy, and Chief Justice Earl Warren said that the right to vote freely for a candidate of one's choice is of the essence of a democratic society, and any restrictions on that right strike at the heart of representative government. Next slide. But the reality is much messier, and as Grant Hayden said, we haven't made progress towards universal political participation. It's been littered with periods of expansion and retraction to lots of groups of voters. American Indians and Alaska Natives are just one of those many groups. Next slide. And I know a lot of you probably know this already, but the Iroquois Confederacy back in 1142 is the oldest living participatory democracy on earth. In 1988, the Senate paid tribute to that with a resolution acknowledging that the original 13 colonies were influenced by the political system developed by the Iroquois Confederacy. So those democratic principles were incorporated into the Constitution. So I think that it's important to remember that when the white European people landed on the shores of America, democracy was already in action here. Next slide, please. Deciding who an Indian is and how to affirm and describe people as Indian is another topic that's been debated and discussed. And I remember when I was in my Native American Studies class in the 70s, they talked about who is an Indian. The Constitution acknowledged tribes as sovereign entities, meaning that they could govern themselves and make decisions. Later rulings with the Marshall Court said that tribes are domestic dependent nations. So a nation within a nation, really. The federal government's policy in general over time has been to try to assimilate Indians into the larger society and give up their tribal identity. And the phrase, I think, was kill the Indian and save the man. Next slide. All right, so we're going to try and go through a timeline from 1776. The Constitution did not give people the right to vote. It acknowledged that, but each state was left to come up with its own way of doing that. And as you're probably aware, at the very beginning, white males were usually the ones that they thought of were the ones who were able to make those decisions and vote. And that is, where we started. Then in 1870, the 15th Amendment extended the right to vote to all races, but again, they found ways to hinder that with poll taxes, literacy tests, and grandfather clauses. The next slide. During the same time, the boarding school system was set up, and Carlisle is just one example of a boarding school my great-grandfather went to. It's a military-style boarding school, and there were horrific hardships. There's no question that the boarding school era was traumatic and horrible, but it also was a place where Indians met other Indians from different tribes. And this pan-Indianism idea began to emerge where people got together and started to talk and became friends. And they formed societies that were intended to try to uplift Native peoples. The Dawes Act was an effort to turn Indians into farmers with a plot of land, a lot of people who had never farmed in their lives, but it allowed them to settle the lands that they gave, that were then freed up, were called excess lands and were given to white settlers. And I think another aspect of that was that they had to renounce their tribal membership. In 1911, the Society of American Indians was formed, and again, that pan-Indian unity that the boarding schools gave birth to helped to call for citizenship in 1914. That is a long time ago. Then in 1920, as you know, this is the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment that granted women the right to vote. Next slide. In 1924, Congress passed legislation that extended citizenship and voting rights to American Indians. But again, many states found ways to deny those rights. And this is my editorial comment, but I believe that a lot of states were afraid that they had so many Native peoples that if those peoples joined together, they would be a very effective voting bloc. And denying those rights was a way to hinder that. In 1944, the National Congress of American Indians was established. And in 1945, Alaska adopted an anti-discrimination law. So very ahead of their time in that. This is something I've been trying to learn more about, but it says here Arizona, New Mexico, and Utah were the last states to extend voting rights. I may need to revise this because the more I look, the more I find different states were doing different things. And some states were keeping people from voting as far as into 1975. So I need to look into this further and find out more. And if people that are listening know more information, I'd love to know more. In 1964, the 24th Amendment prohibited the use of poll taxes for federal elections. Next slide, please. So the Voting Rights Act was huge. If anybody's been listening to the history about John Lewis's life, really played an important part in that. It allowed, or it stopped the barriers to political participation for racial and ethnic minorities, literacy tests, discriminatory districting, and registration practices. '68 was the Indian Civil Rights Act, and then they lowered the voting age to 18. 1970s was the end of determination policy and the beginning of Indian self-determination. They further amended the Voting Rights Act to include language minority citizens, and then in '82 allowed for assistance to blind, disabled, or illiterate voters. All right, next slide, please. I want to highlight two trailblazing pioneers. This woman, her English name was Gertrude Simmons Bonnen, and I hope I'm saying this correctly, Zitkala Sa, which translates to red bird. And those are her dates from 1876 to 1938, Yankton, Dakota, and a very interesting woman. She wrote an Indian opera about the Sundance. She was a member of the Society of American Indians that worked toward preserving Native culture. And she thought Native people should be citizens and have the right to vote. And as early as 1924, ran a voter registration drive. Just an interesting woman. Kind of brought to the fore because of the history of women in voting with the 19th Amendment. All right, next slide, please. And here's an Alaska Native hero. Her name is Elizabeth Petroyevich. She's Tlingit, and she was the president of the Alaska Native Sisterhood and helped fight for the championing the anti-discrimination law in 1945. This quote is kind of lovely. Have you eliminated larceny or murder by passing a law against it? No law will eliminate crimes, but at least you as legislators can assert to the world that you recognize the evil of the present situation and speak your intent to help us overcome discrimination. Next slide. Our next speaker is going to tell you quite a bit about the current situation, so I'm just going to give you a brief overview here. The things that I've been reading about Alaska Natives and voting, again, point to the part that organizations have played in building a sense of working for those civil rights and voting rights that every citizen is entitled to. The Alaska Native Brotherhood was formed in 1912. And then the Alaska Native Sisterhood followed in 1915 and advocated for citizenship and racial justice. The biggest theme I've noticed in my very cursory examination of this subject, and I know that our next speaker will be able to answer more questions on that, but the election materials were not always well translated into Alaska Native languages. The barriers that are presented because Alaska is such a huge state have been huge. For example, for someone who wants to vote, I was reading a bit about that. It said that someone would show up with all the materials and get on to the loudspeaker and announce to everyone that if they wanted to vote, they needed to come over and they would vote. And then she would pack up her materials, get in a Jeep or something, and then go over to the river and get in a boat and go to the next place, and then get a marine radio or something and make an announcement, and everyone would come out and they would vote. And she would do a circuit like that everywhere in that area. And there's some places in Alaska, at least when I was just reading this, that don't have any polling places, or that just have to travel huge distances in order to vote. So the questions and the challenges there are just immense. All right, next slide. As I say, I'm going to defer to our next speaker. There's a lot of people that are wanting to vote, that want to know how to overcome these barriers, but they are getting organized and doing lots to make progress towards that goal. The next slide. Here are some important organizations that have been advocating for voting rights. The National Congress of American Indians has a Native Vote campaign, 4 Directions, and the Native American Rights Fund has been in this for quite a while, working in Alaska, working in all over Indian country. Next slide. So here you see Sharice Davids and Deb Holland, and some young kids working a table trying to sign people up to vote and take the census. We've been making a lot of progress. There's still challenges. I think participatory democracy is a traditional Native value, as you saw with the Iroquois Confederacy. So by voting, I think we honor our ancestors. The next slide. I thank you very much for your time. And now I want to introduce someone who's fighting every day to protect Native voting rights. Ms. Jacqueline Leon is Isleta Pueblo and is a staff attorney at the Native American Rights Fund. We're honored to virtually welcome Ms. De León to our event, and thank you for taking part.
Thank you, and thank you, Rebecca, for that absolutely wonderful, comprehensive presentation. I really enjoyed it. I loved seeing those strong Native women being highlighted, and thought it was a really wonderful overview. And I want to thank you all for having me here today. I'm eager to talk to you all and talk a little bit about the contemporary barriers that face Native Americans, because I think that the contemporary barriers are really going to be surprising to many people, given how severe they are. Next slide. Like Rebecca mentioned, I'm a staff attorney with the Native American Rights Fund, but I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the findings of my report, Obstacles at Every Turn. And what that report was a culmination of work that was completed, a series of 9 field hearings held around the country that was a product of the Native American Voting Rights Coalition. Next slide. What the Native American Voting Rights Coalition is a group of organizations, like Rebecca highlighted, local organizations like Four Directions that work on Get Out the Vote, national organizations like NARF and NCAI, ACLU, other kind of organizations that are all sort of got together and asked the question, why is it that natives are voting at such low rates, and what can we do about it? Next slide. So what we did is we had a series of 9 field hearings across the country. I co-led them with another presenter, Jim Tucker. And what we did was we asked everybody that we could get our hands on, so community leaders, organizations, tribal leaders, community members, politicians, historians, really just anybody that had something to say about why it is that Native Americans vote at such low rates. And in part, some of this was in response to a Supreme Court case, Shelby County v. Holder, where the Supreme Court said that, this type of discrimination doesn't really occur anymore. We don't really need to worry about, overt acts of racism or discrimination anymore. That's all in the past, right? And what we did was go about to see, is it really in the past? Let's investigate. Next slide. So, the reason that we had these field hearings was in order to, try and get some answers so that we could enter into a public education campaign. We also wanted to develop public policy, and we also wanted, if need be, pursue legal remedies. And I'm happy to say that I've been very busy since the report came out. We have brought cases in Montana, South Dakota, Nevada, and sent a whole bunch of other letters telling people to clean up their act. Next slide. So like I said, this was a series of field hearings across the country. And so, one field hearing, we brought in people from multiple states and different tribes in order to get the most comprehensive picture we can. Next slide. And what we found was a remarkably consistent picture, which is really surprising, right? We've got so many different regions, so many different people, and yet we saw that time and time again, there were some factors that kept coming up that made it so that it was more difficult for Native Americans to vote. So high poverty rates, isolating conditions, I'll get into what those are, lack of resources and funding, residential features, non-traditional mailing addresses, voter ID, felony disenfranchisement law, threshold requirements for polling locations, a distrust of federal and state governments, and overt racism. Next slide. So like I said, like I mentioned, poverty makes it hard to vote, right? And I think that I start with this slide because I think that it to when you vote, right, there are costs. And for a lot of people, those costs are really, really low, right? It's you just walk out your door and you can get your ballot in your mailbox, fill it in, and just pop it in your mailbox right outside. You get whisked away to your polling location and you voted. Other people, it's let me walk down to the corner, let me make a short trip somewhere that I'm really used to being, on my, while I'm running other errands, let me pop in to vote, right? In Indian country, those costs are not low. They are much, much higher. And you'll see that throughout the slides and throughout my presentation, is you'll think to yourself, that's an additional cost that somebody has to spend in order to cast their vote. And that's a problem because the higher the costs, right, the less likely you are to vote. And that's compounded and exacerbated by the fact that there's a really high poverty rate in Indian country, right? So the poverty rate is 26.6% nationally, and on reservation lands, it's as high as 38.3%. Next slide. So some of the isolating conditions that we see are, for example, geographic isolation, right? So we know, I think we all intuitively know that Native Americans can live in very rural areas. And if we're from reservation communities, we know what it is to be far, right? But, some of the empirical hard data, so is that Native Americans are often found in hard to count census tracts, which just means that the government recognizes that these are very rural areas. Next slide. There are also physical barriers present on Native American lands that make it difficult to traverse, right? So a lot of times they're underdeveloped. There's a lot of mountains, waters, canyons. In Alaska, for example, in order to vote, you've got to cross a river that may not be frozen in November. In Nevada, to reach an in-person polling place, you've got to drive around a mountain that can take up to 5 hours. So there are physical conditions that make it more difficult. There are also, I think, anybody that's been on a reservation knows that there are poor road conditions often, right? They can be muddy, they can be difficult to traverse, and we have to keep in mind that national elections are on November 3rd. The weather can be dicey, the roads can be bad. Next slide. So this is just an egregious example of the type of distances I'm talking about, which I think, frankly, can be shocking. Right? So the Duckwater has no in-person polling place. They only have vote by mail, and I'll get to why that's a problem in a little bit. But the closest in-person polling location is 360 miles round trip, right? That's 180 miles. And to get to Tonopah, it's 300 miles round trip. That is hours and hours and hours in a car. It has to be a working vehicle that has gas. Next slide. Additionally, so I don't think, right, that that's hard to conceptualize why it is that that's difficult to do, right? But there are also times where the examples are less extreme, but no less limiting, right? So in South Dakota, for example, the polling location for the Crow Creek Reservation was established off the reservation in a non-native community with just 12 voters. And yet they refused to establish the polling location in Fort Thompson that had over 1,200 people, right? So the 1,200 people were forced to travel the 40 miles to go to the town with 12 voters. There's not a good explanation for this, right? Except for the prejudice of the individual county auditor. Next slide. Another isolating condition, which I think Rebecca alluded to, is the linguistic isolation. So there are, and especially among the elderly populations, Native voters that are that only speak their language. And so language assistance is required by law for several areas in Indian country where they have found that there's a significant Native population that requires language assistance. All too often we find jurisdictions out of compliance with this language assistance. Next slide. Technological isolation also plays a part. Over 90% of Indian lands don't have access to broadband. And for many of us that travel to a reservation, I'm used to my phone just completely, losing service the second I cross that reservation barrier. The deeper in I go, the less likely it is that I'm gonna have phone service, not to mention internet service. Many people don't have the devices either. Next slide. So what that means, I think, if you look at the red areas, these are the least connected areas. And really, for people that know Indian country, it's going to be no surprise that these areas overlap quite a bit with Native American reservations. So this map, even though it's a map of technological isolation, looks like the map for Native American communities. And what that means is that when states tout things like online registration, right, that's not going to necessarily be effective for Native American communities. Sometimes there's talk about moving to online voting. That's not going to be an option in Native American communities. And sometimes even the type of equipment that states are switching to don't work without internet access, aren't going to work on Native American lands. Next slide. Additionally, we saw time and time again, there was a lack of resources and funding being appropriated to Native American communities. And the reason that we saw this was because county and local governments were denying the resources. Sometimes they just don't understand their role, right? Native Americans, tribes have sovereignty. We have our own governments. We work a lot we have lots of areas where we are sovereign and we are the controlling authority. Sometimes that can lead to counties being unsure of what their role is towards Native Americans. We saw time and time again, people say things like, they have their system, we have our system, let them stick with their system. Of course, Native Americans are American citizens. Native Americans are also entitled to the political power that comes with being American citizens and being able to vote. They're also county citizens, and counties are responsible for providing them full, fair, and equal access. Next slide. So we saw also time and time again that there was a lack of state and federal dollars being spent on Native American lands. So the registration opportunities just weren't reaching Native Americans. I live in Denver. I can't go out my front door, especially these days, even though I hardly go out my front door, but I can't go without somebody trying to sign us up for voter registration. NARF did a study in 2016 polling people and found that Native Americans throughout Indian country simply had never seen a voter registration drive. They simply did not, nobody had ever knocked on their doors. So political parties aren't spending money, neither Democrats nor Republicans are spending money to try and register Native Americans like we see in other areas. Next slide. So another big category of barriers that we saw time and time again are what we call residential features. So it's not surprising to anybody in Indian country that there's just a lack of housing, right? There's huge housing shortages. There were just 230 reservation homes in the Northern Arapaho tribe for 11,000 members, there's 11,000 members, but there's 230 reservation homes. That averages nearly 48 people per home, right? That's an untenable situation. More commonly, what we saw was 10 to 15 people that were living in a home throughout Indian country. People are often moving from home to home because they don't want to be so much of a burden on a single house. And what that means is that the people that are moving from home to home aren't going to have the type of paperwork that comes when you own a home, right? So the electric bills, the type of, things that say your address just aren't there. The driver's licenses that they may or may not get aren't going to have an address on it. Often tribal IDs do not have addresses on them for this reason. And so that means for states that require, for registration, you to bring in some proof of your address. address, that becomes a huge problem. And increasingly, we have found and argued that that is not legal. For example, in North Dakota, NARF brought suit challenging their voter ID law that required a physical address. But the reason that was also so compelling, next slide, is because time and time again, reservation homes don't have a traditional mailing address on them, meaning that you live 2 miles north of a Hogan, and that's the way that you describe your address to people. It doesn't have the address 1234 Main Street on it. And that means you're not getting mail delivery, and you don't have an address that can readily be filled out on a registration form. The law requires that you're allowed to fill out like a little map, and you can say, I live here, this is the nearest marked cross street, and I live 3 miles northeast of that, in order to register. It's required. But we see there's difficulties doing that. There's difficulties doing that online, and it leads to difficulties in registration, and it makes it harder to vote by mail, which I'll get into in a second. Next slide. So again, it's the same thing. Next slide. So getting into vote by mail, right? I think vote by mail is kind of a darling among a lot of people, a lot of progressives that say, you know what? Voter turnout increases when you move to vote by mail. Let's move to vote by mail. Next slide. But there are a whole host of problems with vote by mail in Indian country, right? So like I said, if you don't have a consistent address, or if your home doesn't have an address on it and you're not receiving mail delivery, then that's gonna be a huge problem for vote by mail, right? You're not gonna have that option of safely going to your front door, filling out your ballot and dropping off. Instead, you're gonna have to travel to a distant post office. Next slide. That post office is often going to have, it's often going to be far, right? So it'll be in like the neighboring city, be 20 to 40 miles away. It's going to be a rural post office. So it's only going to be open, for example, Tuesdays and Thursdays from 11 to 3. And you're going to be sharing a PO box among a lot of family members. 10 to 15 family members are often, the same family members that are sharing a home are often sharing a PO box. And that means that people are picking up and dropping off mail for each other. It means that it is difficult to regularly access your mail. People go months, frankly, without picking up or interacting with their mail, could conceivably miss an entire election cycle. So these kind of distances and these kind of barriers make it difficult to vote by mail. And I'll just say a quick word. There has been a lot of discussion about ballot harvesting, and what that is actually is just ballot collection. And what that is in Indian country is people picking up and dropping off mail for each other because the post office is 40 miles away. And that's absolutely essential in Native American communities. It is absolutely essential that Native Americans be able to pick up and drop off mail for each other because they do not get at-home mail delivery service. So this isn't about some big conspiracy or fraud. It's about the practical ways that Native Americans overcome the unjust barriers in their lives. So ballot collection is really necessary. The next thing, which is what this slide is about, is that because, once again, Native Americans don't have that regular address, they're more often than not getting cut off from their voter rolls. People are reviewing their registrations, and then they're saying things like, this address doesn't make sense to me, and they just toss the registration. So somebody who thinks that they've registered and have registered to the best of their ability often show up to cast their ballot and are told that they can't, that they're not registered. Next slide. Voter ID laws, for some of the reasons that I've already kind of quickly talked about, are really problematic in Indian country because Native Americans don't have regular access to driver's license sites. In Montana, the Crow tribe has to travel, people have to travel 50 miles to the nearest in Standing Rock in North Dakota. They have to travel 50 miles to the nearest driver's license site. These kind of distances just make it really difficult to obtain a driver's license. And it also is just not a part of people's everyday lives, right? And so we saw a lot of times that driver's licenses were not being accepted. next slide, excuse me, were being required, but Native Americans didn't have it. And so there's been a push to allow for Native tribal IDs. Now, tribal IDs only go so far. If the state has requirements on what has to be on those tribal IDs, so not just using the ID to identify who the person is, but also trying to use the tribal ID to verify other things like a person's address, it becomes really problematic because, like we said, Native Americans don't have physical addresses. And so this is one of the suits that NARF brought in North Dakota to talk about, or that challenged the voter ID requirement there that required a physical residential address. And I'll say that case was an example of somebody exploiting the structural inequities that exist in Native America today. And so what happened there is that in 2012, Heidi Heitkamp had won election. And that she was a Democrat. It was a surprise to the largely Republican state. She had a particularly weak opponent that year, and the Native American vote, it turned out, pushed her over the edge. In 2013, as a backlash measure, the legislature enacted a voter ID law. They said they accepted tribal IDs, but then required a physical address on them. In 2011, the legislature had been told that Native Americans don't have physical addresses, so they were well aware of what was going to happen. In 2014, we saw Native Americans getting turned away in large numbers, and that's when NARF heard about this because people contacted and said, I keep getting turned away trying to vote. And we litigated that case for 4 years, researched it for 6. And last year finally reached a settlement with the state after the issue gained national attention. Next slide. Another thing that keeps Native Americans from voting are felony disenfranchisement laws. The felony disenfranchisement laws are common, and they end up, they vary from state to state. I think there was a lot of news in this about Florida, for example. Florida recently overturned its felony disenfranchisement law, but then the legislature tried to impose additional requirements, for example, requiring that they pay off all of their fees before they'd be allowed to vote. But in those cases, I think it's particularly unfair because the state itself acknowledges that it does not know how much each individual ex-felon owes, and so they are unable to tell individuals how much they have to pay in order to vote. But because Native Americans, like African Americans and Latino Americans, are arrested at higher rates, they also they make up a disproportionate amount of the felon population. Additionally, because of unique jurisdictional issues in Indian country where state laws do not apply on the reservations because Native Americans are sovereign, unfortunately, the federal government instead has a Major Crimes Act that says that major crimes are the jurisdiction of the federal government on Indian lands, and as a consequence, because they have they end up overcharging a lot of times Native Americans on Native lands, so that the federal government is able to retain jurisdiction, and so Native Americans end up with higher incarceration and higher crime records, which ends up disenfranchising them down the line. Next slide. Another thing that we saw consistently disenfranchise Native Americans is these things called threshold requirements, which is a requirement that there be a certain number of people either living or registered in an area before they're given a polling place. And it's kind of the cart before the horse here that hurts Native Americans a lot. So states pass what seems like a neutral law, and they say, you know what, you need to have at least 500 people or 200 people registered to vote before we give a polling place. But because there has never been a polling place, right, there are not 200 people registered. Because of all these distance issues and all these barriers I've been talking about, people are not participating in the system. And so it's really difficult to get to that initial 200 registered people mark because there hasn't been the investment of a polling place or a voting center. Next slide. And so, you know, these are just a few examples. Next slide. Finally, you know, there's also these redistricting issues, right? So it's about cracking and packing people. And so let me discuss those terms really quickly. So sometimes in order to disenfranchise and disempower Native American communities that would otherwise you know, be really strong, state legislatures will try and put, for example, on a 3-seat county commission, they'll make, if there's an especially large Native population, they'll make one seat on that 3-person seat all Native and pack all of the Native Americans into one district. So they have one strong seat, but then 2 of the seats are controlled by the non-Native population. And that's something we saw, for example, in San Juan County, Utah. And there, the Navajo challenged being packed into a district when they made up 51% of the county. They were consistently only getting 1 seat. And so as a consequence, the court ordered San Juan County to draw new maps. The county refused. And so the court drew maps for them. In the most recent election cycle, San Juan County ended up electing 2 Native Americans to the county commission. Next slide. So what do all of these barriers mean, right? Why do all of these barriers suppress turnout? Well, it's not just that it makes it hard, right? Those costs that I was talking about earlier. Those costs that I was talking about earlier certainly make it hard and are reasons why people don't vote. But it also, I think, creates a culture of distrust. It communicates very clearly that Native Americans are not welcome and that this is not their system. And take on top of that all of the history that Rebecca was talking about, right? And it's no surprise that Native Americans highly distrust federal and state governments, right? And the other part about this is that, you know, as Rebecca had mentioned in her slide, does anybody know about why in the 1960s, New Mexico, Utah, and Arizona all were continuing to disenfranchise Native Americans? What that was is a reference to 3 cases that were brought at the time, challenging the fact that it was the official position of New Mexico, Utah, and Arizona that Native Americans were incompetent to vote, right? Because in previous court cases, the judge had likened the tribal relationship to like a ward to its guardian. And so the states then argued that Native people were not civilized enough to vote, right? It's a deeply insulting, deeply racist view that permeated and continues to have its legacy, because 1960 was not that long ago. And it wasn't until then that the courts finally overturned it. And those cases arose in the mid 50s is when they ended up being litigated. But the states finally allowed tribes to vote, but then immediately imposed literacy tests in order to limit Native Americans from being able to vote, akin to the Jim Crow laws that we saw. And I will say that the brave Native Americans that brought that suit were World War II veterans that had fought for the country and came back home and could not vote, and said, why not? And they said, because you're incompetent to vote. And they said, if I can fight for my country, then I can vote in my country. And the courts finally agreed. Utah pulled its law before final determination was made, probably seeing the writing on the wall. And full enfranchisement did not come until the 1965 Voting Rights Act, when things like the literacy tests were thrown out. But you know, voter suppression continued. Next slide. And so what we're seeing, like I said, was just an absolute distrust and exclusion of Native Americans from the American political system, both literally in the lack of location of polling locations, and figuratively and emotionally through the ways in which all of these barriers communicate to Native Americans that they are unwelcome. Next slide. And I would be remiss if I didn't actually talk about the overt racism that occurs in Native Indian country. So in South Dakota, the polling location was a repurposed chicken coop. In Arizona, the border town was so racist that they, to this day, block the water that goes into the neighboring reservation because, there's such deep animosity. There was consistent testimony that police were used to intimidate voters. Next slide. So for example, this was in 2019 or 2018. And this person was in North Dakota talking about how there's a heavier than usual police presence on the road between the reservation and the polling, where the polling place was, specifically on election day when they're not usually there, just checking the plates of people that go by. Next slide. And so these absolutely dismal facts, right? This absolute injustice that's occurring means that my job in a lot of ways is horrifically easy, right? It is throughout courts, it doesn't matter if a Republican or a Democrat appointed the judge. Courts are finding time and time again that there's been a violation of Native Americans' rights because the facts that we present are absolutely overwhelming. The injustice is so clear. And so we face a lot of hurdles. We are fighting, as Rebecca said, to increase turnout, to educate people about their rights, about what they're entitled to, that they're entitled to an on-person, on-reservation polling place, even in the time of pandemic. There's been this push to move by mail, but because of all the reasons I talked about, it's really difficult, if not impossible, to vote by mail in Indian country. And so in-person polling locations that have PPE, that offer things like curbside voting, are the safest way for Native Americans to vote. Next slide. And that's all I've got. So happy to answer any questions. I think there was like a couple of minutes of questions was on the agenda. So if anybody has any, let me know. If not, I'm happy to turn it over to the next speaker.
So we do have time. If you would like to ask any questions, you can put it into the Q&A box or you can use the chat function. We are getting people saying, thank you so much. This is fantastic information. Someone also says, sign up to be a poll worker. The average age of a poll worker is 70.
That's right, yeah. Please do, and please insist on, the proper PPE, face shields, allowing for curbside voting, social distancing. There are ways, we know increasingly that this is a respiratory illness. We know that there has to be circulating air, wearing masks is really and keeping distance and being outside to the extent possible in November. You can form queues with your cars where people are, given a number and they wait in their car and get called in individually. There are ways to do this safely. And we should all demand that of our of county officials. Also inquire in your reservation community if that on-person polling location is being maintained, because we see a lot of counties trying to move to all vote by mail, despite the fact that Native Americans just aren't going to receive that ballot. We have lots of reports of these ballots being just stacked up in post offices, or because the people are unable to get to the post office to pick them up, not because they're not wanted or not because they're not important. We hear these myths about, oh, all these abandoned ballots. No, it's because literally very difficult to get a ballot by mail in Indian country. So we think that it's really important that in-person voting locations are maintained and done safely. So please inquire with your county as to whether or not your in-person polling location that you're used to is going to be maintained, because it should be.
Now, we do have two questions. The first one is, what's the best way to encourage those who feel their vote won't count due to past barriers they've witnessed? And then the second one is, what are resources to help those with disabilities as an additional barrier?
So first, I want to say that recognizing that somebody who doesn't vote because of past barriers and anger toward the system has a legitimate grievance, right? They're not crazy or lazy or uninterested in their communities. They're just taught over and over again that the system isn't for them, so why would they embrace and engage it, right? It's a legitimate feeling. But I think it's important to say and recognize that that is a tool of oppression. Like those states, I was saying, the reason that they said that Native Americans were incompetent is not because they felt that Native Americans were incompetent. They had met Native Americans. They know that we are smart, intelligent, and capable people. It's because they were afraid of the political power that Native Americans could potentially yield. And Native Americans across this country can yield significant political power. We have, within the margins that these elections are decided in Wisconsin, Michigan, Minnesota, Arizona, North Nevada, all of these states, right? If Native Americans voted en masse, we could decide the presidential election. We could decide county elections. We should hold way more school board seats, way more seats in the House of Representatives. We would have much more much more power, and Native American sovereignty would be much better protected. And so the answer is, I understand your grievance, I understand your anger, but there's power out there, let's go get it. And what was the second question?
What are resources to help those with disabilities as an additional barrier?
Absolutely. So, disability is a huge issue. And another reason that we think in-person polling locations should be an option. So language assistance and disability assistance can often only be provided in person. And so we think that there should be in-person polling locations that are accessible, so not 100 miles away, for people so that they can go and get the help that they need to cast their ballot. And so that's all I have. I want to thank you again for having me. I really appreciate it. Feel free, if you have any additional questions, to reach out to vote@narf.org. Now I think I'm going to turn it over to Charmaine Fuller-Cooper with the AARP to present Protect Voters 50 and older. Thank you again.
Thank you, Jacqueline. This is a hard presentation to follow because it had such meaningful information, both from Jacqueline as well as from Rebecca, so thank you. Good afternoon or good morning, depending on your location. I'm Charmaine Fuller-Cooper, a campaign field manager with our national campaigns team at AARP. I'm delighted to spend some time with you today on a topic that, guess what, everyone is discussing, including whether you watched the debate the other night or not. It's a topic of conversation. Next slide, please. AARP's 2020 voter engagement campaign, Protect Voters 50+, is focused on helping you cast your vote safely and making sure you know all your voting options. And that includes even one of the questions that Jacqueline was just asked on how can voters who have disabilities vote. So we want to make sure that everyone understands their voting options. Americans 50+ deserve to vote safely. And candidates need to address the issues that matter to us. And when we think of residents and long-term care, we also want to make sure that we're not forgetting them as well, because everyone is eligible to vote. AARP has a proud 34-year history of nonpartisan voter engagement, providing voters with information on where the candidates stand on issues important to our members and their families, so they can make their own decisions. Right now, I want to make sure that I remind you before the presentation is over that AARP was able to gain access to both of the presidential candidates. And we have a wonderful new interview of both President Trump as well as Joe Biden, where they're stating clearly where they stand on key issues to the 50 plus. And I invite you after this presentation to visit aarp.org/election2020 to see that latest interview with both of the presidential candidates. Next slide, please. So what's at stake? AARP is working hard to make sure the 50 plus voter is heard. Next slide. So what are some of the key issues? Strengthening Social Security. AARP will never stop fighting to strengthen Social Security and make sure hardworking Americans get the benefits they've earned. Now, with so many Americans struggling to afford health care and other basic needs, we recognize that Social Security is even more important, and AARP will not stand by for any effort to cut benefits or leave Social Security on shaky financial ground. What does this mean for the American Indian and Alaska Native population? In 2017, the median earnings of a working age American Indian and Alaska Native who worked a full-time year-round schedule was $36,000 compared to $48,000 for the general population of all working age people. This $12,000 deficit continues to impact the American Indian and Alaska Native population throughout your lifetime, and it impacts the amount of earnings that you will receive when it's time for retirement. Next slide, please. So I mentioned strengthening Social Security as one of AARP's key priorities for our voter engagement campaign. But we also recognize that financial security and healthcare go hand in hand, which is why protecting and strengthening Medicare is also a key priority. Medicare is more crucial than ever as Americans face that 1-2 punch of the coronavirus's health and economic consequences. Providing affordable health care for 62 million Americans age 50 plus, as well as people with disabilities. Hardworking Americans pay into this program their entire working lives, and we count on the benefits that help make healthcare accessible and affordable. And AARP is committed to strengthening Medicare. So again, what's the impact for the American Indian and Alaska Native community? We know that elders are living longer, but long life can mean chronic illness as well as disability. And we also recognize that this community experiences high rates of some chronic illnesses, whether that's diabetes, cancer, heart disease, or all three, in addition to others. And these chronic illnesses can make self-care difficult and even more so as we all age. Next slide. So we've discussed Social Security and also Medicare. But we also know that we've seen a devastating impact on families and nursing homes due to the coronavirus pandemic. We recognize that the coronavirus has claimed the lives of more than 70,000 residents and staff of nursing homes and other long-term care facilities. And we recognize that throughout America, people age 50 plus and others in need of long-term care face a patchwork of public and private services, costly institutional care, and many times rely on unpaid family caregivers, like some of you may be at this current time. So what is AARP doing when it comes to voter engagement? AARP has 53 state offices. That includes all our 50 states, as well as DC, Puerto Rico, and the Virgin Islands. In our Arizona state office, state staff collaborated with the Secretary of State to develop clear recommendations for county election officials to assist voters in long-term care facilities. In our DC state office, when it came to people who were in long-term care facilities, our DC team is currently working to educate those individuals who work on the front lines as essential workers in those long-term care facilities. We recognize that laws vary in each state, so if you have a loved one who's in a long-term care facility or you're serving as a caregiver for someone who desperately wants to vote, we encourage you to visit aarp.org/election2020, and that will be repeated later in the presentation. But AARP on this website has a plethora of information that's specific for each state that we serve as to what your voting laws are in your state. And also, if you have additional questions, provides contact information for your state secretary, your Secretary of State, or your State Board of Elections. Next slide, please. So, in addition to Social Security, Medicare, and our work for long-term care, we're also desperately in need of lowering prescription drug prices throughout the United States. We see that skyrocketing prices are putting vital prescription drugs out of reach for many Americans age 50 plus. Many people with pre-existing conditions are having to choose between paying for their life-saving medicines and other important needs. And AARP is fighting for greater accountability and transparency to stop big pharmaceutical companies from price gouging patients and taxpayers. And we recognize that in Indian country as well, that many people are having to make life decisions of splitting their medications, cutting pills, not paying utilities because they have to have their medication this month to survive. And that's not right for any population. Next slide, please. Our last key priority is one of economics, and we're fighting desperately at AARP to secure the economic health of Americans 50 plus. Unemployment during the coronavirus crisis reached the highest levels since the Great Depression. And even this week, we're continuing to see more and more people who are having to file for unemployment. We recognize that older Americans have been disproportionately affected. And Rebecca mentioned earlier her work with CSEP and placing older Americans in jobs. AARP is demanding action from our elected officials to protect the health and financial security of voters 50 plus. We want to know, what are candidates' plans on these key priorities? And we also want to ensure that older workers can recover from the economic downturn caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. Next slide. So AARP wants your help to cast your vote safely. Jacqueline mentioned that isolation and poverty are key issues and barriers for people being able to access their polling locations, or even just to know their options to safely vote, and even in times to have to report obstacles to vote. So at the end of this presentation, I encourage you to share the information that you've heard today with your friends and family members, and even your colleagues, those that you work with closely or even virtually, to make sure that they are aware of their options to vote, how to cast their vote safely, and also too, if they're looking for information on where the presidential candidates stand on key issues mentioned today, to share aarp.org/election2020 with your friends. I also recognize Jacqueline shared an excellent map related to technological isolation throughout the United States and barriers to people being able to access high-speed internet. And we know that's a real issue for AARP members, for people age 50 plus, but also families under 50 plus. And we want to make sure that you don't limit yourself to just sharing your information via email, but also feel free to get on the phone to have conversations with friends, family members, and colleagues to make sure that they also have their options to vote. Next slide, please. So again, if you're watching this webinar from home, please take out your pencil or type on your keyboard this key website where you can find lots of information from AARP on your voting options, where you can be directed to your voting options for your specific state, and also to look at where the presidential candidates stand on key issues mentioned today. Again, aarp.org/election2020. Next slide, please. I want to thank everyone for your participation today. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Charmaine. We definitely have time for questions. You can enter them into the Q&A bubble, or you can put them into the chat. We are getting comments of great work that they appreciate your presentation. Okay, well, thank you so much, Charmaine. We greatly appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thank you, Jennifer.
Let's go ahead and take a 5-minute break, it looks like. And we can come back at 2:20. Does that sound good to everyone? All right, then we will see you at 2:20. We also want to make sure that you know we will be having another raffle, and you do need to be present to win. So we hope you join us back at 2:20.
Well, I think we're ready to move on. Again, this is Sue Chapman, and those were some great speakers earlier today. I want to thank them very much for all the information that they brought to the group. And I'm going to do another drawing right now. And the names that have come up are for the $20 Walmart gift certificate are Rosetta Walker and Myra Fred. So if you are over there celebrating, congratulations on getting your $20 Walmart gift certificate, and thank you for participating in the presentation today. Now I'm going to turn it over to Desiree Lapahi, who is with NICOA. She is our data analyst. And Cheryl Archibald, who is also with NICOA, and she's our executive assistant to the executive director. They're going to talk a little bit about why data matters. So go ahead, Desiree, go ahead and take it away. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I am so glad you are able to join me for today's presentation of why data matters, presented by me, Desiree Lapahi. And Cheryl will come on later on in the presentation. So next slide, please. Now, when you think of data, I'm sure the first thing you think of is just a bunch of numbers and maybe some graphs. But what do these numbers tell us? Well, in this presentation, I'd like to present to you how data can be used and what types of stories it can tell us. Next slide. Now, whether you realize it or not, data is everywhere, from sports to health to even in commercials. You know, in sports, you can see if your team has a 60% chance of making it to the championship, or even in commercials where 8 out of 10 dentists recommend this toothpaste. But you're probably thinking, why does this data matter to me? And I will discuss that in the next slide. So data not only measures progress, but it also inspires it. For example, accurate reporting allows us to see where successful policy are taking root, so that we may replicate those successes to other areas. But for each success that data uncovers, significant hurdles still remain. But that's okay, because data can help us address these hurdles. Next slide. Now, how does data affect you out there? Well, the data that's collected are helpful for state, federal agencies, and important stakeholders. For example, NICOA has a project called the Long-Term Support and Service Survey available to the public. And we're looking to find what type of LTSS services tribes and American Indian people are interested in. From the survey, we hope to create resources for LTSS services in Indian country. And it all starts with the data that's collected from this survey. So this is one of the ways that data can affect you. Next slide, please. Another way data can affect you is in advocacy efforts. Complete, accurate information is the backbone of all advocacy efforts. It can bolster your case and explain why this policy change is needed and why it works. You know, for example, and this is just my example, this is not, I did not take this from anywhere, so do not quote me on this. This is just a hypothetical. So for example, the adolescent crime rate has decreased by 25% since there are more afternoon programs, after school programs, I mean. Now, an advocate can use this data to push for more funding to keep the after school programs going. Or an opponent can use this data to say that, well, adolescent crime rates are down, but vandalism has actually increased. So Data can be used to boost your efforts, or they can be used against your efforts. So it's important to question whether the data you see actually supports these people's claims. Next slide. Now here are some tips when you're questioning the data. One of the questions you would want to ask is, how many people were surveyed? For example, if a poll asked 5 natives whether it was Indian taco or Navajo taco, those 5 natives do not represent the 5.2 million natives who know it is Navajo taco. Just kidding, I'm impartial. And the second tip is to beware the not so spectacular statistic. You know, those that you usually see in commercials. In 2007, Colgate was ordered to stop using 8 out of 10 dentists recommend this toothpaste in Britain because the type of survey that they did actually showed that while dentists did recommend Colgate, they also recommended a different competitor toothpaste. And the way they were marketing their toothpaste made it sound like the dentists were like, oh, Colgate all the way, but that's not actually true. So beware those statistics. And this actually follows into the next question of who did the primary research of the analysis. Now, in the Colgate or in any other company, private company, they will do polling until they get the stats that they want. And you can see this in beauty companies where they'll have, oh, you know, 80% of women saw a difference overnight. Well, that 80% might only be from 5 people. So they'll just stop polling. They'll be like, oh, 5 people, you know, got that 80%, let's cut that off. But in government institutions, they'll poll everybody. So you'll have a more accurate account of whether it is Indian taco or Navajo taco. Okay, next slide, please. Now, another important use of data is in voting. Voting is not only your civic duty, but it can also be the turning point of the election. Now, most states have a winner takes all system where the popular vote winner gets the state's electoral votes. Now you think, oh, you know, my vote couldn't possibly make such a difference. Well, it can. You know, in 2017, a Virginian House of Delegates race ended in a tie out of 23,000 votes cast. They had to figure out the winner by pulling a name out of the canister. And the result was heightened by the fact that the win gave Republican control of the state house by a single seat. So, you know, a single voter could turn the tides. Next slide. Now you're thinking, okay, so I know why data matters, but why should I vote? Well, your vote may not directly elect the president, but if your vote joins enough others in your voting district or county, your vote undoubtedly matters when it comes to the electoral results. Remember, there are also local and state elections to consider. Now, while the presidential and other national elections usually get a significant voter turnout, local elections are typically decided by a smaller group of voters. This means that low turnout means that important local issues are determined by a limited group of voters, making one single vote more statistically meaningful. Now, I will turn it over to Cheryl, who will tell us why data matters when it comes to the census. Next slide.
Good afternoon. And again, thank you for joining us for this interesting presentation with all the different information that can help you get out there and vote. I'm Cheryl Archibald. I am with NICOA, the executive assistant here. And part of data is the 2020 census. So why do we want to participate? The census is critical to our community because by participating, you're speaking for generations of Native people that have come before you and yet to come. Census data can help determine our Native community's needs for schools, housing, healthcare facilities, senior centers, and many other programs that benefit our communities. If we don't go out and take the census and let them know where we are and who we are, we could lose money in the future. We want to make sure that our Native communities are visible and heard. Our communities are growing, and filling out the census will ensure that we are counted and that we are heard. Everyone needs to be counted to make sure that we're getting our fair share of representation in local, state, and national government. Both Jacqueline and Becky had mentioned the distrust that we have with the federal government because of past circumstance. We need to overcome that and show them who we are and that we do have a voice and we do matter. Information gathered from the 2020 census will determine where more than $800 billion a year in federal funding will go over the next 10 years, including but not limited to medical services, WIC programs, childcare, funding for public schools, funding for low-income housing, senior centers, senior programs, and special and adult education programs. More and more of our elder communities are going back to school. Our elders are finding that they have the time now to go back to school and finish that degree that they started and would like to finish. Community leaders will use this information to plan and decide where to build new schools, recreation areas, hospitals, senior centers, and fire departments over the next 10 years. Next slide, please. Is the census data safe? Now, the Census Bureau is bound by Title 13 to keep your information confidential. Under this title, the Census Bureau cannot release any identifiable information about you, your home, or your business, even to law enforcement or anybody else who asks them. Violation of this is a federal crime, and it is punishable by prison and or a fine of up to $250,000. So the answers you provide are only used for statistics. You are kept anonymous. The Census Bureau is not permitted to release your responses in any way that would identify you personally or anyone in your household personally. If the Census Bureau is talking with you, they will never ask for your full Social Security number. They may ask for the last four, but never the full number. They will never ask for a bank account or a credit card number. They will not ask anything on behalf of a political party, and they will not ask for money or donations. Next slide, please. So how do you respond to the census? We now have until October 31st to respond. They extended the deadline again. You can go online to my2020census.gov and you can complete the online questionnaire. It's available in 17 different languages online. To access it, go to the website. On the top of that website, there is a global icon where you can determine if you want to change the language you want to participate with. If you want to use your native language, click on the icon, choose your native language, and you can participate with your native language. If you don't want to get on the computer, you can always just make a phone call. That's 844-330-2020, and that's for the English hotline. They're open every day from 7 a.m. to 2 a.m. Eastern Time. There are also other language options, and they're available Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. Eastern Time. The Census Bureau also offers web pages and guides in 59 non-English languages, including sign language, as well as guides in Braille and large print. So everybody has a way to fill out the census. If you prefer to do it by mail, back in March, the Census Bureau began mailing out invitations. In mid-April, they mailed out more paper questionnaires to the people that hadn't responded online or by phone. If you are responding by mail, make sure you use a blue or black pen. Do not use a pencil. It's not dark enough to fill in the blanks. And once it's finished, you can mail it to the address on the screen, the Census Bureau National Processing Center, 1201 East 10th Street, Jefferson, Indiana, 47132. Now, even though you've done this, you may still see an in-person census taker. Next slide, please. These takers are walking around the neighborhoods and they may visit your home and collect the 2020 census data. Make sure that if someone comes to your door and says they're with the census, look for these items that they will be carrying. They'll have census bags and other equipment with their logo on it. They may also deliver a paper questionnaire, hanging it on the front door or a gate in a water-resistant plastic bag, like the one shown on the screen. But if you're talking to them directly, make sure that they have a valid ID badge with their photograph, that it has U.S. Department of Commerce watermark on it, and an expiration date. We don't want you to give your information to the wrong people. They have identification and they have plenty of things to show that they are with the census. So what you can expect if someone comes to the door, the census takers will all be wearing masks and following the local public health guidelines when they visit your home. The census takers were all required to complete a virtual COVID-19 training on social distancing and other health and safety protocols before beginning their work in neighborhoods. And if the census taker comes to your area and they are not speaking your specific language or you're not comfortable with them, you can request a visit from a different census taker that speaks your language. They will only arrive in your home between 9 a.m. and 9 p.m., including weekends. If no one's home, they will leave a brochure or a notice of their visit on your front door or on your gate, giving you information about how to fill out your census form, either online, by phone, or by mail. Next slide, please. And there are some simple questions on the census. They do not have the U.S. citizen question on there. They ask, how many people are living in your household on April 1st, 2020? April 1st, 2020 was the day the census started. That is the reason for that date. And they want to count everybody living in your home on that date. There's a couple follow-up questions to that. You know, were there any additional people living here on April 1st that you didn't include in question 1? Is the house an apartment or a mobile home? These questions are specifically asked so that they can produce statistics about home ownership and renting. They also help with administering housing programs, planning and decision-making for the neighborhoods where you're located. So they will also ask for a telephone number, and the only reason they ask for that is if there is something on that official census form that you send in that they have a question about. That's the only time they will use that number. And then it goes into, it asks you about person 1's name and person 1's sex and age, date of birth, and their race. And they'll ask this for each person in the house. And the reason they ask these questions is with statistics to better understand the size and characteristics of different age groups, different races, different areas, different locations. The agencies use this data to plan and fund government programs that support specific age groups, such as young children and the elders. They're also looking for grandparents raising grandchildren, multi-family, multi-generational families that are living in one house or in two. They ask about how the second person is related to the first person, and they just want to develop more information about families, households, and groups that are living together, the different relationships data. And that way they can create new programs and fund programs that will support families, including families that are raising children alone, grandparents that have taken in the grandchildren, or grandparents that are even helping take care of their child and the grandchildren. So all these questions that they ask are only for statistical information. They don't categorize it by name or your social, anything like that. They categorize it by the different areas that the questions pertain to, so they can get statistics to better fund the areas that they are looking at. So if you want more information about the census, you can go to 2020census.gov, and the specific website /BN/about-questions will give you more specific information about why each question is asked and how important it is. If there are any questions, I'm more than happy to help answer them for Desiree or I.
Cheryl, we do have a comment. It says, as the SCSEP director, what I am seeing is that areas of Indian country are not getting money coming to their areas for the program because of the poor census information. It's more important than ever to encourage everyone to complete their census forms.
And that is absolutely correct. They're missing a lot of data from the Native Americans because of the history and the bad blood between the federal and the Native Americans. We have to be counted. They are a large group. The more we can get counted and the more accurate count we get, the more money we can get funded for their programs. And that is why we're trying so hard to get this out to the Pueblos. And the people that are out in the neighborhoods are from that local neighborhood. So it should be somebody that either you know or your family member knows out there asking these questions and helping fill out these forms.
And I believe the census was extended until October 30th. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. It is extended until October 30th. So you still have another month to go out and fill this out. There are still legislation, there are still people pushing to have it extended even farther into the new year because the results that they are getting is not what we want. We're getting 50% and lower response rates from Pueblos, and we want more than that. We need more than that. There are a lot of natives out there that need to be counted.
Very, very, very true. Thank you so much, Cheryl.
You're very welcome. If there isn't any more questions, then I will proceed. The next presentation we have is financial security. And again, that is by me. And I work again at the National Indian Council on Aging. Before I came to the National Indian Council on Aging, I have about 35 plus years working as a tax professional and doing small business and individual tax returns and helping people with Social Security and Medicare. So this afternoon, I'm going to be giving you some basic information about Social Security, tax planning for the upcoming 2020 filing season, and basic Medicare information. Next slide. So that's what we're going to talk about. Next slide, please. So let's start with Social Security. This is what you need to know. So how does Social Security work? Well, Social Security replaces a percentage of a worker's pre-retirement income based on their lifetime earnings. So the portion of your pre-retirement wages that Social Security replaces is based on your highest 3 to 5 years of earnings, and it varies on how much you earned over the course of your working life. And how much you earn and when you choose to start your benefits all will determine how much you get in Social Security. So there are some eligibility rules. You're eligible when you work and you pay Social Security taxes, you earn credits toward your Social Security benefits. You need 40 credits in order to qualify for Social Security. That is usually 10 years of work approximately. And a worker receives 1 credit for each $1,360 earned in 2019. This amount is adjusted each year for cost of living. The amount of earnings that's needed for a quarter of coverage increases automatically each year, and a maximum of 4 credits may be earned in any given year. Now, you can, if you stop working before you have enough credits to qualify for benefits, your benefits will sit on your Social Security record, and if you return to work later, more credits will be added. And they will continue to be added. But Social Security won't pay any benefits out. They can't until you have worked the entire 40 credits. So it's important to check your Social Security as you're working. It's never too early to start looking at your Social Security and start planning for when you retire. Even somebody that's 20 years old needs to take a look and see where they are. The elders and people starting at age 50, it's imperative you start looking at your retirement to know, kind of plan where you're headed. So now you're eligible, you know how you're eligible. So when are you eligible and how do you find that out? Choosing when you start receiving retirement benefits is your personal decision. The age you begin collecting your retirement benefit affects how much you will receive. There's 3 important things to know about age when thinking of when to start your benefits. You can start benefits at full retirement age, early retirement age, or a delayed retirement age. Next slide, please. On this slide, it shows full retirement age at 62, benefit by year of birth. Full retirement age is the age when you will be able to collect your full retirement benefit amount. The full retirement age is 66 if you were born from 1943 to 1954. That's the first row of numbers on this chart. The full retirement age increases gradually if you were born from 1955 to 1960 until you reach 67. For anyone born at 1960 or later, full retirement benefits are payable at age 67. So this chart hasn't been updated in quite a while. They have kept the years of birth and the retirement ages the same. It is possible that they will increase those. That has been a discussion. If you decide you're going to do early retirement, you can get Social Security benefits as early as age 62. However, your benefit's going to be reduced if you start receiving benefits before your full retirement age. And this will affect your benefit amount. Once you start receiving that benefit amount, if you start receiving it before your full retirement age, you're going to get the amount. For example, you start receiving your full, if somebody at full retirement age 66, they decide to get their benefits at age 62. This chart is based on a $1,000 benefit per month. So they decide at age 62, they want to take their retirement. That's early retirement. They have 48 months between the time that they're age 62 to the time they are at full retirement age. So their $1,000 a month benefit is reduced to $750. That benefit does not increase when they turn their full retirement age. The benefit that you get when you start getting your benefits is the benefit you'll receive with cost of living increases for the duration of your Social Security retirement. You can also delay your retirement age. When you delay collecting benefits beyond your full retirement age, the amount of your retirement benefit will continue to increase up until age 70. So once you turn 70, there's no incentive to delay claiming, to delay claiming your Social Security. Once you turn age 70, you're at full retirement age, and because you've worked up to that point, you have increased your benefit amount. So when you start looking and planning for your benefits, you want to look at options of what happens if I decide I want to retire at 62? What if I retire at 65? What if I retire at 70? So that you have a variety of options and you can plan when a good time would be for you to retire. Next slide, please. So there's some things that can affect your benefit amount. Everyone's retirement is different. Beyond deciding when to receive retirement benefits, there's some other factors that can affect the benefits you get, whether you continue to work, the type of job you had, and if you had a pension from certain jobs. Continuing to work, if you continue to work and work beyond your full retirement age, if you do, that increases your future retirement benefit. Each extra year you work adds another year of earnings to your Social Security record. Higher lifetime earnings can mean higher benefits when you choose to receive the benefits. But keep in mind, that's only up to age 70. It doesn't change your earnings if you work beyond age 70. Then there's specific types of earnings that are looked at differently. While Social Security earnings are calculated the same way for most American workers, there are some types of earnings that have different rules. And those types of earnings could be farm work, household employment, such as a maid or a nanny, military service, railroad earnings, self-employment income, and any work outside of the United States. If you have any of these type of earnings, you need to talk with either the employer or your financial advisor to see how this is going to affect your retirement and your Social Security. The pensions and other factors that could be something you need to be aware of are pension and taxes have the potential impact on your retirement benefit. And if you have a pension from a job, specifically where you didn't pay Social Security taxes, this could possibly lower your retirement benefit. You might have to pay federal tax on your Social Security benefits in certain situations if there's additional income or if you were in a specific job that requires additional taxes to be paid. So like I mentioned earlier, it's important that you start looking at and planning your retirement now. It's something you want to look at to see what you're ready for, plan for what age you want to start receiving it, what is going to be the most beneficial to you. And if there is a spouse in the picture and you're married, there are spousal benefits that you need to take a look at and compare with your benefits and what is going to be best for you, what is best for your spouse, what is the good time to take these. So those are the things you need to look at. If you're already receiving benefits, then you need to take a look at what you're getting and make sure that you're getting the best result from your choices. And if there's anything you can do to change those or adjust those to give you a better benefit amount, you need to meet with a financial advisor, a Social Security analyst, or depending on the information you're looking for, a tax professional to give you some more information and detailed information about your specific situation, because everybody is different. We all worked, or you worked somehow, even if you were a housewife, you still worked. But if you don't pay into the system working throughout time, you don't have a Social Security of your own. But if you're married and you were a housewife, you can still get the spousal benefits because your spouse worked. So that is another reason why it is good to look at all the benefits and see what you qualify for and when you qualify for it. Next slide, please. So we'll go on to talk a little bit about 2020 taxes. So the rules for 2020 are pretty much the same for 2019 so far. The IRS will continue updating the laws and making adjustments up through November. They have done it all the way through December in some prior years, but there isn't a whole lot on the table right now. So they're not going to change much, if at all. Right now, federal income is taxable. All income is federally taxable. Individual states do have their own rules on what income is taxable and what income isn't. There are 8 states that do not have any individual income tax: Alaska, Florida, Nevada, South Dakota, Texas, Washington, and Wyoming. These states do have sales and use taxes. They just don't have individual income tax. So don't get those confused because they are reported differently. The sales and use taxes are not a federal tax return thing. They are not by federal dates. The states have their own rules for those and when they're paid and how they're paid. So be sure also, if you're getting an American Indian, tribal income, native income, check with the people that you are doing your tax returns with and make sure that they understand that there are different tax treaties that the American Indians have with the federal government that give different rules to native income, specifically for the states. The states will have very specific rules on how to apply Native American income. Now, the federal return is the federal return. It's always done first. The state return follows the federal. Some states require a completely new return. Other states require they start with a taxable income and work from there. For an example of that would be New Mexico. New Mexico has special rules for American Indian income. The federal, it's taxable. On the state, under certain circumstances, it is not. Make sure that your tax professional understands those rules so that you are getting the best benefit you can on that tax return. Social Security income can be taxable if you earn more than the limits below. If you're under full retirement age, $18,240, you can earn anything below that before it becomes taxable. In your full year of retirement age, just that 1 year, you can earn up to $48,600. And anytime after full retirement age, there is no limit on income. Next slide, please. This is just another view of the full retirement age to show you where you might fall. Next slide, please. So now that we know that federal income is taxable and the states have different rules, American Indian income is different, the other thing you always need to be aware of is the filing status that you choose. And to determine your filing status, there are 5 different categories. Single, which is very basic, simple. You're not married, you're not married or legally separated. This is the second highest tax bracket. So if there's any way you qualify for any of the others, it's always better to use the others. The next thing we'll look at is head of household. This is an unmarried person who provides home for a qualifying child or relative, and it's a lower tax bracket. It's closer to the married filing joint tax bracket. But head of household, for the qualifying child and qualifying relative, that is your dependent. It's, like I said, it's a lower tax bracket. If you have someone living with you that you're taking care of, be sure to check the rules to determine if this person qualifies you for the head of household status. It is a much more favorable than single. And if you do qualify for head of household, there are other credits and deductions that you're going to most likely fall into the category of that will increase your refund or decrease your tax and increase your refund. The married filing joint is a married couple as of the end of the year. Legally married couple, you can have either one income or 2, it doesn't matter. A spouse is not a dependent, a spouse is a spouse. It's a married filing joint, you have you and your spouse, or you have you, your spouse, and dependents. So the spouse is never a dependent. There is a married filing separate status. Now, married filing separate is when a married couple doesn't want to file together. It's the highest tax bracket there is. You lose a lot of credits and deductions when you file this status. However, there are certain circumstances where it is beneficial for a married couple to file this way. It is not difficult to have the person that is preparing your tax return to look at both categories of filing status. Do a married filing joint, do a married filing separate, see which one benefits you the most. You don't have to file, you have to file one or the other, but you're not stuck with married filing joint just because you're married. You can do a married filing separate if it benefits you. And there's no reason not to look at both of them. The final status is a qualifying widow or widower. This is for an individual whose spouse has passed away. And this is the filing status they can use for the first 2 years following the year the spouse died, providing that you meet the other requirements. And one of the other requirements is that you have a dependent child living in the home. You don't see qualifying widower very often, just because a spouse usually doesn't die when you still have young children in the home. However, it does happen. And the reason they say for the first 2 years following the year your spouse died is the year your spouse passes, you still file married filing joint, just like he was in the house or she was in the house all year. So take a look at your filing requirements and think about if you have anybody in the house besides yourself that you are taking care of, and you're not married and you're single, look at the head of household status. See if you meet those other requirements that qualify you for this. Because we are seeing that there are a lot of elders now that are taking care of their grandchildren. And if you are providing if you're providing support for that child, you're living in your home, you could be qualified for the head of household status rather than single. And there are credits and deductions for you and those children. Next slide, please. So once you determine your filing status, then you start looking at filing requirements. There are what they call the minimum filing requirements. So you look at your income, and if you're single, you have just the one income to look at. If you're married filing joint and you both work, then you're going to have 2. If you're head of household, you probably just have the one income. And that is a better tax bracket. There's more credits and deductions available to you. But the minimum filing requirement says that it increases a little bit at a time for the filing status. It is based on the filing status. And more elders are becoming head of household because they're taking care of their grandchildren and their children in some cases. So like I said before, be sure to check this to see if you qualify for this filing status. Keep in mind, if you have an unmarried child that lives with you, no matter what age they are, they live with you for the entire year, they could qualify you for the head of household status. And once you've got that down, you understand what your filing status is and what is best for you, then you look at your income. And if you're single and you have income under $12,400, you're under the age of 65, you're not required to file a tax return. Head of household, if you make under $18,650, you're not required to file a tax return. And under age 65 are larger numbers, are smaller numbers than if you hit over 65. Comparably, head of household at under 65 is $18,650. Anything under that, you don't have to file. Head of household over 65, you make $20,300. Anything under that, you don't have to file a return. Granted, these numbers are there. They do increase a little bit each year for cost of living. It is something that we generally look at this. It is combined income from both spouses. If you make less than this, you are not required to file a tax return, generally. There are a few exceptions, like if you're self-employed and your income is over 400, you're required to file a tax return based on the type of income, not the minimum filing requirement. So always be aware there is a minimum filing requirement. Also, just because you don't have to file a tax return, you want to take a look and see if filing a tax return is going to be beneficial. Just because you don't have to doesn't mean you can't. You can file a tax return to get a refund of credits and deductions that you are eligible for at that $23,000 income level, especially if you have children. There are deductions for earned income, there are deductions for college, there's deductions for your standard deduction, there's itemized, there's all kinds of different deductions and credits that you could qualify for. So you want to keep that in mind. And also, as I mentioned before, a portion of your Social Security benefits may become taxable if your income exceeds a certain when income exceeds a taxpayer's base amount. Now, the base amount is determined by your filing status and your income. So you need to speak with somebody, a tax professional, a financial advisor, somebody that can verify what your minimum level is. So we have elders, once they look for that number because they want to work just enough to earn up to the limit of income before their Social Security becomes taxable. Because what they can do is work up to, let's say, $20,000 and stop before their Social Security becomes taxable. So the only taxable income they have is what they worked, not their Social Security. If you go over that, a portion of your Social Security can be taxable up to 85% of it. It will never be 100% taxable, but it could be up to 85% depending on other income. Next slide, please. So what we're seeing now is the IRS is sending letters out to people who did not file a 2018 or 19 tax return yet, and that did not receive the stimulus payment that came out earlier this year. You have until October 15th to go online to irs.gov and apply for the stimulus if you haven't received it. You can also wait and claim a refundable credit on your 2020 tax return. And there are two types of credits. There's a refundable credit and there is a non-refundable credit. A refundable credit is one that is applied to your tax liability first if you have one. If you don't have a tax liability, it is all refunded to you. If you have a tax liability, then the difference between the credit and what you owe will be refunded to you in a refund. Because of COVID-19, sorry, it skipped a line. The stimulus payment also is not taxable. I know they've gone back and forth about it would be, it wouldn't be, it would be, it wouldn't be, and they finally stopped at it wouldn't be. So that stimulus payment that we received is not taxable. So it will probably go in the return and off the return, a debit and a credit. So it's just, it was free money to you. A lot of people also received unemployment because of COVID-19. The unemployment is going to be treated just the same as any regular unemployment. So that is up to you to make sure that the federal taxes are withheld and state taxes, if allowed, in your state, so that you are covered at the end of the year. If you have extra income, like unemployment income with taxes that aren't being withheld, or you are wondering if you're going to have a tax liability, there are ways to look at your income now and find out what you're looking at owing, if you are. And somebody can sit with you and explain to you how to figure that out so that you can plan now. And if you're still working, you can have additional withholding withheld for the next 3 months to help cover that tax due at the end of the year. Or you could start putting money away to cover that tax due at the end of the year. And then next year, when you file your 2020 return, at that point, you can decide, this is what I need. You can plan for 2021, so you don't have to pay at the end of the tax year. Everybody's tax situation is different. Everybody has different income. You have different circumstances. You have different family lifestyles. You have different types of income. So you need to look at this individually with either a tax professional, or you can talk to a financial advisor, or you can talk to somebody that you trust that can help get you the answers you need for the upcoming tax year. I'm going to move on to Medicare. Next slide, please. So another thing that's coming up is we have Medicare open season, which starts October 15th. And let me go over a few of the Medicare basics. Medicare is a very complicated and convoluted system. There's different pieces and parts, and they all function different ways. And we're all being bombarded with the Advantage plan commercials, and Medicare Advantage takes this and it helps with this and it can help over here. And they're all different. They all have different requirements and they all cover different things. Medicare it's the federal health insurance program, generally for people who are 65 or older. There are certain younger people with disabilities or people with end-stage renal disease that also can qualify for Medicare. There are 3 parts to Medicare, 3 main parts to Medicare. Part A, which is your hospital insurance, that covers inpatient hospital stays, care in a skilled nursing facility, hospice care, and home health care. Medicare Part B, this is like your medical insurance, covers certain doctor services, outpatient care, medical supplies, and preventive services. Medicare Part D, this is your prescription drug program. It helps cover the cost of prescription drugs. Now, it doesn't cover all of the prescription drugs. Medicare doesn't cover everything. So it's important when you start to pick a Part D plan that you know what medication you're currently on and make sure that your plan that you're choosing will cover that. So what does Medicare cost? Well, there are lots of different variables to this question, but to give you just a basic idea, Medicare Part A is premium free for most people. We paid that premium during our working life. Out of your paycheck, you had a Medicare tax that you paid. That paid your Part A. So you don't have a premium for Part A now. They say it's free to you, but you really paid for it throughout your life. Medicare Part B, the standard premium for 2020 is $144.60 per month, and this premium will change over time as people in higher and lower tax brackets can pay different amounts. And this amount is withheld from your Social Security check if you're getting it. If you're not getting Social Security, then you're going to have to pay it out of pocket. Next slide, please. So now, when do you sign up for Medicare? Well, if you are getting Social Security, you start receiving Social Security at 62, all the way up to 65, then you will be automatically enrolled in a regular original Medicare. There's nothing you need to do. Medicare will send you a card in the mail in about 3 months in advance of the month in which you turn 65. If you're not receiving Social Security, then you need to sign up, and you need to start looking at this 2 to 3 months before the month that you turn 65. Your initial open enrollment period is the 6 months following the month of your 65th birthday or when Medicare Part B start date. Medicare Part B is the one that you pay out of pocket if you're not receiving Social Security. So that is all based on if you start getting Medicare, you're not on Social Security. That's what they mean by your open enrollment period starts when your Medicare Part B starts. And you can go online, or you can go to the Social Security office and do all of this set up, but you need to make sure you do it 2 or 3 months in advance. The other date to remember, as I mentioned originally, open enrollment is October 15th through December 7th. This is the time to make changes to any existing plans, start looking at what's available. You see a lot out there about these Advantage plans and Medicare and all the different things, these new services that they're covering, the dental, the vision, hearing aids. Those 3 things specifically are not covered under original Medicare. They just aren't. Advantage plans are starting to cover them. The Advantage plans are starting to cover more and more things. Next slide, please. So again, how do you sign up for Medicare? If you're already receiving Social Security, you'll be enrolled in original Medicare, which is Medicare Part A and B automatically. Like I said, there's nothing you need to do. You'll receive a red, white, and blue Medicare card in the mail, and without having to take any prior action to enroll in Medicare. If that situation applies to you, there's nothing else you need to do with Medicare. Your next step is to pick a Medigap plan and a Part D plan if you're going to use those. I'll explain what a Medigap plan is in a moment. If you're not receiving Social Security, you will need to go in, you will be enrolled in Medicare A automatically, but you need to enroll in Part B, which is your medical coverage part of Medicare, and Part D on your own. So, what is a Medigap plan? A Medigap plan fills in the gaps in original Medicare. What this does is Medicare, the original Medicare A and Part B will pay for certain things. There are deductibles and there are copays. A Medigap or a supplemental plan fills in those gaps in Medicare. They will pay the copays, they will pay the deductibles, they will pay anything Medicare doesn't. Now, these plans range considerably in price depending on where you live, but the national average for someone turning 65 is around $110 a month. And some states are $20 to $40 a month lower than that. Some states are $20 to $40 a month higher than that. But that plan you add it to your Medicare, so they're still going to pull out the $144.60 for Medicare. And you're going to pay the additional supplemental cost on your own out of pocket. But when you go to the doctor, everything is covered at 100%. Whatever Medicare doesn't cover, your supplement will. Keep in mind, these are more expensive than the Advantage plans, and they are different. And I will get into that shortly. Now, Part D is your prescription drug coverage. Your prescription drug coverage, this is going to be an additional cost to you, and you need to pick there's all kinds of different plans, so you need to look at the different plans. Make sure you look at the plans that are going to cover the medications that you're currently on and anything you think you might start to take. Now, you can change these plans once a year, but you need to be sure you have it, especially if you have a supplemental or a Medigap plan, because they do not include prescription drug medications. An Advantage plan can. Part D, national average premiums are around $35 to $50 a month, and there are plans as low as $12 to $15 a month, and some are a little higher, It just depends on what the rates are in that state that you're living in. There are penalties for not having prescription drug coverage that continue to accumulate until you have a prescription drug plan in place. Keep that in mind. So now we'll look at the difference between a Medigap plan and a Medicare Advantage plan. We see a lot of commercials, and it's a constant bombardment of Advantage plan, Advantage plan, Advantage plan. They cover this, and they cover that, and they cover this. Well, they do. They cover a lot of things that a supplement won't. Like I said, dental, vision, hearing aids. But Medigap plans are not Medicare Advantage plans. And Advantage plans aren't Medigap or supplement plans. The basic level, the biggest difference is Medigap plans work with your Medicare. So you still have your Medicare. They supplement it. They work with it. While Advantage plans take the place of Medicare. So Advantage plans you don't have Medicare anymore. You have just that Advantage plan. And that Advantage plan takes the place of your Medicare. Now, there are good points and bad points to that. Now, for Medigap plans, a supplemental plan works with Medicare, not in place of it. A Medigap plan, you can use it anywhere that accepts Medicare, any doctor that accepts Medicare. Now, the premiums are a little higher. They are higher than an Advantage plan. Very few out-of-pocket costs. Your out-of-pocket costs are going to be your actual premium and your prescription copays. It's also guaranteed renewable. It's never canceled. Your benefits never change. As long as you pay your premium, it's always there. Like I said, coverage doesn't change. You can always use it. It always stays the same. Now, you can switch from a Medigap plan to an Advantage plan without any medical questions being asked. You cannot. The only time you qualify for a Medigap plan or a supplemental plan without having to answer medical questions is during your initial enrollment period. After that, if you go ahead and you don't get a supplement and you go into a Medicare Advantage plan and then decide, oh, you don't want this, you want the supplement instead, then you have to answer a medical questionnaire, and they have to actually accept it medically for you to qualify for that plan. So that's the Medigap, that's your supplement. So now you have a Medicare Advantage plan, and this is where all those commercials on TV are talking. It takes the place of Medicare. You have to work within a network. Their doctors, either an HMO or a PPO or their network of providers, where they are, yes, the premiums are lower, but you have more out of pocket. You have more copays and those type of things. But the premiums are lower, and premiums can be zero, depending on where you are. But the Advantage plans, those networks are renewed annually, which means coverage networks can change, benefits can change, doctors will change. So there's a little bit, if you want to keep, if this is where you start looking at the Advantage and the supplement and which one you fit into better. Can you pay more out of pocket initially, or can you pay more out of pocket down the line? That's where the question comes in. And if you want to switch from an Advantage plan to a Medigap plan, like I mentioned before, you have to qualify medically. To go from a Advantage plan, to go from a Medigap plan to a Medicare plan to an Advantage plan, there might be a few medical questions, but it's going to be easier to get into those plans. They're going to cost you less, but then you have to deal with their coverage networks, their doctors, those type of things. So it's up to you, really, which one that you prefer to have. But be sure you ask the questions. Be sure that you understand what your options are so that you get the best benefit for yourself. Next slide, please. So in closing, just a few dates to remember. October 15th, final day to apply for that stimulus payment if you haven't gotten it already, or if you want to wait to get your refundable credit at the end of the year. Just remember to mention that when you get your taxes done. October 31st is the final day for census participation. Please, please fill out that census form and get it in. It is going to provide more money and more programs and more benefits for the Native communities. And that's what we need. The benefits are few and far between. The more people that are counted, the more people they know are there, the more services that we're going to be able to provide. Keep in mind, apply or start looking at your Social Security at least 2 or 3 months before you turn 62 or the age you want to start collecting Social Security. It's never too early to look at it. Never too early to start asking the questions. What is going to happen when I turn 65? What is going to happen when I turn 63? I want to work till I'm 64. What happens then? What happens if I retire and my spouse works, or if my spouse retires and I work? Those are the questions you need to know. And then again, the whole topic of today was voting, November 3rd. Get out there, get your vote counted. As Desiree said, everybody matters. We all have a voice. We all need to make our voices heard and let them know that the Native communities are not going to stand by and just be ignored anymore. We need to be heard. We need to be represented. And thank you for your time. If there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
So we do have a couple. Thank you so much, Cheryl. We've got a moment or two to go ahead and respond. I think these are a couple quick questions. The first one is, how secure is the SSA website where you can check your contributions and more online? Many are leery of sharing the detailed information it asks for.
The Social Security website is extremely secure. You can, your account, it's very hard to hack it. They will not allow, when you apply for Social Security, they make it very clear that that website is for you and you only. You should not have anybody get into that website besides yourself. It is you have your username, your password. They ask some very specific questions that only you would know the answer to. And so unless somebody has been around you forever and knows exactly where you've lived every time in your life, because they do ask things like, have you ever lived at this address? And they'll list 3 or 4 addresses. And if you don't choose the right one, you're locked out automatically. To get back into your account, you have to speak with them directly. And again, they'll ask you those questions that are very specific to you that nobody's going to have the answer to. If you do want help with doing your Social Security, you can, if you have somebody that you can trust and that you do trust, you can make arrangements for them to help you with that. But Social Security does not recommend you share that information with anybody. So it is extremely secure.
Great, thank you so much. We've got another one. Does your retirement eligibility ever go away if you don't claim it by a certain age and there has been many years since you worked?
No, it's always there. Your Social Security will sit there until you claim it.
Fantastic. We've got one more. This talks a little bit more about the census. If someone applied many months ago to be an enumerator but never heard back, what do you suggest? Are enumerators still being hired, especially in Indian country?
They may be. I'm not sure if they are or not, but I would go to the website and contact them. There are different phone numbers to call and find out if they are still hiring. And depending on where you are, you could actually check with your tribal chapter house or your tribal council, and they should be able to tell you who is the enumerator for that area.
Fantastic. And those are all the questions. So thank you so much.
You're very welcome. If anybody has any other questions, even after the fact, just send us an email. We'd be happy to answer them.
Can you answer this one? I think I know the answer, but it's, would someone qualify for Social Security if they worked for the federal government, or would that be considered double dipping?
No, it depends on the type of job you had with the government. If you had withholding on your W-2 that was federal income tax withholding and Social Security withholding, you would qualify for Social Security. But you need to check with somebody either at the government agency where you worked or a financial advisor, tax professional, somebody that could answer that specifically for your organization and your status. Because what could happen is you have two different types of money and two different types of retirement that you just have to determine which one you take first and which one you take second.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
And if you don't have any more questions for me, I am going to thank you for your time. And I want to introduce our next speaker, Leslie Malley, to speak with you about advocacy. Thank you. Leslie?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm glad to be here with you today. My name is Leslie Malley, as Cheryl said. I am with the National Indian Council on Aging. I am the CSEP Compliance Manager. And today I'm going to take you through a short but informative presentation on advocacy. It is labeled Take Action, and it's Advocacy 101. Next slide, please. What is advocacy? Advocacy is defined as any action that speaks in favor of, recommends, argues for a cause, supports or defends, or pleads on behalf of others. In the most basic sense, advocacy is speaking up about something you believe in hopes of improving a situation for yourself or others. Next slide, please. How to get involved in advocacy. When is the right time to get involved with tribal, local, state, and federal issues that affect your community? The answer is now. There are many ways in which your voice can be heard. They say all politics are local. Begin by researching who represents your area, attend tribal council or town hall meetings to find out what topics are being discussed. Register to vote. All of these actions can become reactions and assist your cause. In the next slides, we will find more information on how to get involved in your community to make a difference. Next slide, please. Register to vote. Very important. The importance of your vote and your voice is enormous. It is one of the ways we can contribute to the change that we want to see in the world. Past elections have shown us that the United States voter turnout is in fact low. And as Jacqueline said earlier, there are a lot of barriers for those living on reservations and in rural areas. This could be why our voter turnout is low. We have a lot of things to do, so it's kind of hard to set aside time to go stand in long lines to vote. But it's very important, so it's good to have a voting strategy. Plan ahead. There's a few questions you can ask yourself. What do I need to register to vote? Can I vote early? Can I vote by mail? Do I have to be registered with a political party to vote? Is identification required? Preparation is key to have a successful vote. One place you can go is the Fair Election Center. This offers an annual updated guide to each state's voting laws. It's a great resource for you, your family, and friends to stay informed. Next slide, please. This is what the website looks like. If you go there, you can click on your state and it will give you information including registration deadlines and election dates, official election websites, what types of IDs you need to register and vote, where do you vote, how can you vote, and it does have a section for common questions. Next slide, please. Another way that we can ensure our advocacy efforts are going good is to stay informed. Research is very important. It keeps us educated and informed. It may take time for you to do so, but it's well worth the effort. There are several informative websites that can get you started on the right track. I have a few listed below, and another great resource is a local or national newspaper. You can find a lot of information in those. Congress.gov is the official website for the U.S. federal legislative information. It provides access to accurate, timely, and complete legislative information for members of Congress, agencies, and the public. The Native American Rights Fund, they have a great website. Since 1970, they have been providing legal assistance to Indian tribes or organizations and individuals nationwide. The National Congress of American Indians. NCAI has a great Get Involved section. This is a page on advocating for Indian country. You can also become a member there to get updates and stay informed. The Pew Research Center is a nonpartisan fact tank that informs the public about issues, attitudes, and trends. And it is, they don't take any policy positions, so it's just a nice place to kind of see where the country's at. Another great resource that we learned about today is AARP. You definitely want to check out their website. Next slide, please. You'll want to also research your tribal, federal, state, and local elected officials. It is important to know where they stand on topics that you are passionate about. Issues and solutions can begin locally. Given the right attention and support, these issues can gain state and federal attention. Many issues right now deal within the following categories: citizenship, community sovereignty, social issues, domestic policy issues, economic issues, immigration issues, electoral issues, healthcare issues, education issues, and of course, environmental issues. Next slide, please. To find out who your tribal leaders are, the chief executive of a tribe is generally called tribal chairperson, principal chief, governor, or president. If you go to the website below, it's the BIA.gov. You can find a directory. If you use the search function, you can pull up contact information. Next slide, please. At the federal level, you can go to live.zerodata.com. You get to this website and you enter your address. It will pull up your local, state, and federal representatives. At the federal level or national level, you have 3 main legislators, 2 senators, and 1 representative. Every state has 2 senators who represent all people of their state, regardless of their geographic area. Representatives serve based on geographic area called their district. You have 1 representative at the national level. Next slide, please. For your state representatives, you can go to the same website and it will pull up all of your representatives. And at the state level, you have 1 state senator and 1 state representative. Unlike the national representative, both state senators and state representatives serve based on your geographic area or your district. Next slide, please. At the local level, there are many different elected officials who may have influence over specific issues and policies. Depending on where you live and what you are interested in advocating about, some of the most relevant local elected officials may be tribal leadership, the mayor, members of city council, members of the school board, or the district attorney. Next slide, please. This is the tribal leaders directory at the BIA.gov. It's really user-friendly. You can put your location in and it'll bring up your tribal representation. And then you can click on that to get more information. Next slide, please. This is the live.zerodata website. It does have a lot of information. I tried to just give you an example here. Once you put in your address, it will give you your local, state, and national representatives. Once you can click on the person. It'll give you their contact information, their web address, their Facebook, their Twitter, their physical address, their phone number for contact purposes that we'll speak about a little later on. And it does that for local, state, and national. Next slide, please. The most important part of advocacy is using your voice. There are many ways to do this that are equally effective. Organization is key in this process to obtain the full amount of attention your voice is projecting. Have a clear goal in mind and a plan of how to achieve it. Focus your message. Public messaging is crucial to political action. A clear, specific message usually works best. There are different ways to communicate with the people who will listen. Here are a few examples. So you can attend a tribal council meeting. attend a town hall meeting, make phone calls, write emails. You can also form a focus group with people of like mind. Next slide, please. Preparation. Good preparation is important in effective advocacy. Below are some examples of preparation and how to get started. Information is power. The more you educate yourself on topics and policies you want to speak on, the better you can present your thoughts, ideas, concerns, and questions to the appropriate person. Have a specific goal in mind. Sometimes goals can be broadly stated, but goals can also be much more specific. Try to be as specific as possible about what you want to achieve, and if possible, what specific actions you would like to see happen. Identify key issues. When you can clearly identify problems or barriers that exist, you can focus your advocacy on what needs to be addressed. Identify solutions. Solutions may not always be easily identified. Communication and conversation with others can lead to solutions that will help your advocacy efforts. Identify allies. There are power in numbers. Talk with your family and friends and neighbors. Identify those willing to attend meetings with you. Remember, being a good advocate does not mean that you must go at it alone. Identify individuals you need to contact. These are the individuals who have the authority and ability to make decisions based on feedback from the community. The individuals are your tribal leadership, local representatives, and state representatives. If there is a policy that is hanging in the balance at the federal level, contact your legislators. Next slide, please. Communication is really important. Effective advocacy requires good communication. Communication can take many forms, including phone calls, face-to-face meetings, letters, and emails. Be clear and concrete. Make sure that the message or request is stated clearly. It should also be brief and to the point. Often we want to include everything that revolves around the issues. However, if we add too much information, we can become sidetracked on other issues that may not be as important as the topic at hand. Be assertive. When you communicate with others, they will need to understand that you have goals that you wish to achieve. Talk firm but not harsh. Stand tall and use eye contact. Remember, assertive communication is not aggressive communication. Listen to others. Listening is a simple way to respectfully communicate with others. It means that you are open to listening to their point of view. When others are speaking, do not interrupt the thought, let them finish, and then you can assertively state your thoughts on the matter. Ask questions. If you hear something that is not clear to you, ask questions. Asking questions may be a good way to get valuable information that will ultimately assist your advocacy efforts. Asking questions may be a good segue into forming relationships with individuals who may be able to help you, those that are in the position to make decisions. Use visual communication. When speaking to someone about a cause that has directly impacted your life or the life of someone you know, put this into a story. Make it personal. This shows a different perspective that others may not have caught on to at first. You can then share your examples of how a situation can be improved. Next slide, please. Documentation. Keeping notes of your progress can be very helpful in your advocacy efforts. Keeping a notebook. Document your efforts is a good way to stay organized. You will want to write down dates, names, and titles, contact information, and topics discussed and/or outcomes for each person you meet with. You may need this for reference during follow-up. Also keep files. If you have correspondence that you receive, whether it's positive or negative in terms of your cause, keep all documentation readily available. You may need this in the future as well. Getting verbal acknowledgement is good feeling. If you can obtain that information in writing, this is better. Next slide, please. And follow-up. Often when we advocate for any policy or topic, it does not provide immediate results. The policies you want changed may need some time and attention for months or even years. Some situations require persistence and effort to achieve success. Do not get frustrated. Continue to follow up until you feel you've been heard. Connect with others. If you are going at this alone, involve others. Communication is a key factor and can create power in numbers. Compromise. Sometimes advocacy is about negotiation. What are things that you are willing to compromise on or settle for if you cannot get what you want or need? The next best solution can be better than no solution at all. Next slide, please. And thank you so much. I've enjoyed speaking to you today. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you so much, Leslie. Just a reminder, you can put your questions in the Q&A bubble or even in the chat. We're getting comments, great job, and they appreciate your presentation.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Leslie. We really appreciate that.
Thank you so much. I would like to thank you once again for your time today, and I would like to hand it back to Mr. Larry Curley, NICOA Executive Director. Thank you.
Thank you, Leslie. Excellent job by all the others. At this particular point, I think there's another opportunity for Sue Chapman to make some very important announcements. So, Sue, it's all yours.
Thank you, Larry. Okay, we got 2 more winners that are coming up for a $20 Walmart gift certificate. And I hope that most of you stayed on just for the gift certificates. I know you didn't. Great job by all the presenters today. I've really enjoyed listening to everybody and all the information that they've imparted upon us. So without ado, I will read the last 2 names. We have Rachel Allen. Rachel Allen, you're our winner as well. And the second winner, last but not least, is Tess Brazou. I'm not sure if I said that right, but congratulations, everybody. Gift certificates should be going out in the mail next week. And so we look forward to getting those out to you, and thank you so much for participating today. With that, I'll hand it back to Larry for a wrap up.
Thank you very much, everyone who has sat in and listened to what we have been talking about for the last hour and a half or so. The National Indian Council on Aging is an advocacy organization. We do what we can. And I think, as Leslie indicated in her presentation, there is power in numbers. And we have over 500,000, 500-some thousand older Indians out there. If every one of them voted, imagine the impact that would have not only in Indian country, but at your state elections and who represent you and who will talk on your behalf. And at the national level, we have the opportunity on November 3rd to be involved. In that whole process, numbers important. When we talk about the census, we're talking about over 5 and some million Native Americans and Alaskan Natives in this country. We need every one of them to be counted. How we do it is getting involved, taking up the mantle and saying, we need to get involved, we need to be counted. Get your grandchildren to go out and make sure that our elders are aware that they need to be counted. Everyone in Indian country needs to be involved and be counted in this process. It's going to be something that's going to be in effect for the next 10 years, the census. If we have 5 million in 2010, in 2020, that should be going up. But if we only get 4 million people being counted, that's a 20% reduction in population. That probably means a 20% reduction in funds coming to Indian country. It affects our senior centers, the Meals on Wheels programs, the congregate meals, all of the activities that our elders benefit from. But I think that we started off this whole day talking about how we as Indian people and as Native people have been involved in this whole voting process. Rebecca mentioned how, in terms of history, the things that have happened in the past from the time 1492 happened and on forward from 1776 to currently, all the different efforts and the fights that were fought to make sure that we have that right to vote. And that right to vote was hard fought. We talked about the obstacles, the things that are still happening today to keep Indian people from voting. And we're also looking at how some tribes have managed to go around every one of those barriers, but the fight continues and it will continue. And that is something that we need to be aware of. That we have organizations out there that are fighting on behalf of older people. Organizations like NCAI, the National Indian Health Board, AARP, N4A, National Association of Area Agencies on Aging. And even in a very subtle way, kind of like the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain, we have some people at the federal level and federal agencies who provide us with the information necessary to take these issues and take this information and make them legitimate advocacy issues. And I think that as we look at these issues, what are some of these issues? Things like Social Security. When we vote, it affects the people that we vote into office and what their stands are, what their positions are on Social Security. On Medicare, things such as we've been hearing a lot about pre-existing conditions. Those are issues that are impacted by the people we elect to office. We're talking as well about rising drug costs. I think for some Indian people, they think about IHS, Indian Health Service. Oh, we don't pay for our prescription drugs. But on the other hand, the people that pay for those drugs is the Indian Health Service. And if drug prices are increasing, IHS pays more for healthcare and more prescription drugs. That lowers the amount of monies that are available for other types of services that IHS could provide. We talked about how we look at data and how data is used. These days, we have surveys upon surveys upon surveys, and we as Indian people sit back sometimes and go, oh my God, I and we are being surveyed to death and researched to death. It's how that research is used. It's how we take that research study to address those issues that affect us. I'd like to just share, many years ago, back in the early 1980s, the National Indian Council on Aging did a study on Indian tribes around the country. And out of that study, we found out, because today, for example, in the Older Americans Act, under the Title III program, eligibility for services under the Title III program was you have to be 60 years of age and older to get congregate meals, Meals on Wheels, other social services that are funded by Title III of the Older Americans Act. At that point in time, there was a discussion about making that age also be a requirement for Title VI programs. But the study that we did, we found that Indian people at the age of 45 exhibit the same physical, mental, economic disabilities as those non-Indians at age 65. The end result of that was that we took that data and gave it to members of our congressional delegation from New Mexico at the time. The end result was they changed the legislation language to read, aging or elderly will be determined by the tribes themselves. Whatever age the tribe determines elderly means. And so that was the impact of that study, that research, and that was how it was used. And one of the things as we talk about studies and research and how we as Indian people can get involved is that many years ago when I was a nursing home administrator with the Pueblo of Laguna, for example, we were talking about the study that was done. We decided in the Pueblo of Laguna that we would take our elders to Washington, D.C. That is advocacy. We got them involved. We took 10 of them to Washington, D.C. to meet with our Senate representative, congressional delegation. And those Indian elders, almost all had never been past Albuquerque, New Mexico. They had never been on an airplane. They'd never stayed in a fancy hotel, but we took them and they wore their traditional outfits when they met with their senator. That senator took the words. We were given 15 minutes with the senator. When it was all over, it was 2 hours later. And each of those elders spoke to their senator. And the end result was that change in legislation that went from age 60 to whatever the tribe determines. This is what we can accomplish as older people, that you have that opportunity. And it's convincing tribal leadership that you can represent yourself as well, that you can talk on your own behalf. And that is not something that it has more impact when it comes from the mouth of an elder when they talk to their congressional delegation, that this is an opportunity and maybe once in a lifetime for you as an older person to be able to impact a piece of legislation. In the last year, we went through the reauthorization of the Older Americans Act, and the National Indian Council on Aging was there. Late maybe, but we tried hard to change some of the language, some of the funding that was allocated for the Administration on Aging Title VI program that benefits over 400 Indian tribes in this country and older Indians in those tribes. And so we have had an impact, but it would have been something to see older Indians descend on Capitol Hill in their traditional outfits and making an impact. And Leslie went through the whole process of what advocacy is all about. Where to go? Who are your representatives? How do you find them? And one of the things that we as Indian people do, and as most people do, I find, that is very, very easy to find problems. It's easy to do that. But the hardest part of finding and looking at those problems is to find the solutions and recommend solutions to those problems. Years ago, and I'm going to digress a little bit and just share an example with you. Years ago, when I was working in the state of Nevada, tribes in Nevada felt that the Indian Health Service, they have area offices in the Indian Health Service, and Nevada was under the state, under the Phoenix area Indian Health Service. Tribes in the state of Nevada have been complaining for years that the Phoenix area office was ignoring, neglecting them. And these were issues that have been raised over and over for many years. And there was a meeting that was held with our senator from Nevada. And he said to us, you know, we've been having these meetings all these years, and not once have you ever told me what the solutions are. We, at the time, I was working with the Indian Health Board of Nevada. We took his challenge and we said, okay, fine, let's come up with a solution. The solution we came up with was, why don't we have our own area office in the state of Nevada? We took that and we ran with it and took it back to Washington, D.C. And in the reauthorization of the Indian Healthcare Improvement Act, there is now a provision for the establishment of the Nevada area IHS office. We created the 13th area office, the first in 50 years. We had that impact because we came up with a solution. And as Leslie's presentation indicated, we have these opportunities. It's becoming informed, learning who your representatives are, and making a go of it, giving it your best shot. And that's what we try to do here at the National Indian Council on Aging. And with the partnerships that we're developing, I know one thing, we can't do it alone. And with the support of organizations like AARP and other organizations like the National Indian Health Board, the National Congress of American Indians, we try very hard to make our voices heard. And that's where we need you. We need you to vote. We need you to sit at your doorstep and say, I want to be counted for the census. That's our responsibility as Indian people, as grandparents, for your grandchildren and their grandchildren. We need to be counted. We need to vote. And so with that, I want to thank you for sitting in and listening. And hopefully that we can move forward and make it a better world for all of us. Thank you very much. If there are any questions or comments, I'd be more than happy to entertain.
Thank you so much, Larry. That is fantastic. We have just a couple of minutes left here. Were there any other questions? Okay, Larry, did you want to close us with the closing prayer?
And again, I can't learn Shidian, no station mo, Yadikashija, Kehelan Condishigo. A hidden now see Latoyat Elshi not any carlo lit. Ayat eho corda, then he disanto. Yat Elshi not any carlo adult, ego not any carlo, that he not any than Lenny. But since Sledgy than Lenny, than he desangi by Henson. Ado she ate alcohol, Nasco, Nenigit, not the knee carlo yat eho, Nikitajon, not the knee carlo adult eho. A court at Ayas and a non sleto little. More the she air, Nasco, not any carlo litishna. Hajanastly, 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 Hajanastly. In a prayer.
Thank you so much. Have a great afternoon, everyone.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you. The webinar has ended. Have a great afternoon.